Okay, so around the time that TPOT 21 came out, I made a review on it. And in hindsight, that review sucks. So I'm going to try again. I'm going to go through all my initial points for this episode and adjust them based on how I currently feel about the episode. Starting with the first point. TPOT 21 is a textbook example of a decent episode. This point is one I kinda stand by to some extent. It's confusing, I know. Back when this episode was teased, my main hope was that this was just a normal episode. Nothing super climactic or anything, just a regular episode. And it was! And then I gave it a 6 out of 10, which is confusing because I think the episode's actually a bit better than that. But the normal episode thing is something I'm much more critical on now. TPOT 22 works as a chill episode because it focused on a completely separate cast of people that were not as affected by the events of TPOT 19. With TPOT 21, I don't know if it works. There are some parts of this episode that are taken pretty seriously. I think the very beginning of the episode's a good example. But once a challenge rolls around, and even a bit before then, the episode is just really goofy, and I don't think it works. As much as I wanted just a normal episode, in hindsight, it just wouldn't work. As critical as I am of the route the show took after TPOT 19, if you are gonna go down that route of it being more serious, then could you just commit to it? I don't know, that's the most I ask for. Anyways, 2's backstory. In the original review, I didn't like 2's backstory because I believe that was not what the writers were planning initially in BFB 16. That is an awful point, and I deeply apologize. Admittedly, I do still believe that was not the initial plan, especially since there was a line in TPOT 2 where 2 says something along the lines of, I decided to become a host all on my own, rather than in TPOT 21 where they just say, I just stole for show. You could argue 2 was lying in the TPOT 2 scene, but then I'd argue, 1, it's not your job to explain something that the writers didn't, and 2, lying is just really out of character for 2. Also, there's that one part where 2 said, I tried to act cool with some skateboards, and then showing 2 on the planet 9 would end up on. This is very nitpicky, but I feel it'd be better if 2 just said what they said before the line. I tried a few different facades, and then maybe they didn't really work out while showing the scene with the skateboards. I don't know, specifically mentioning the skateboards feels kind of unnatural, you know, show it on tell or whatever. But other than that, the backstory is fine. I don't understand what I was complaining about. On top of 2's backstory, we have the conversation between Price Tag and 2 itself. I don't think my opinion on it has changed much. I always really enjoyed this scene. Dialogue was relatively natural. There were some issues I had with it, such as the aforementioned skateboards thing, but then there was also Price Tag saying that they and 2 aren't that close, and 2 basically saying the same thing moments later. But this is TPOT, so we're grading on a curve here. I do like that 2 was able to find a friend after Gady vanished, and I'm always a sucker for host-contestant dynamics, so this gets a pass from me. Next, I'm going to talk about our favorite lesbian polycule. I don't think I have much to say about this that I didn't already say in my previous review, but to reiterate, I really like these scenes, also one of my favorites in the episode. Semi-related, but I do find it funny how Pencil still has a sizable amount of relevance this episode despite not receiving a single line. Hot take, I do think it's very annoying how much screen time Pencil is getting, but as a character, I think she's fine. The last 2 points I made in my original video relate to the visuals, and they're both points I still stand by. However, I feel I misworded them originally. In the original review, I said the animation looked bad in some parts. And no, it really doesn't. The real issue is that despite this supposedly being a dark and dramatic episode, the animation tends to be way too cartoony and tends to be really hard to take it seriously. I think the biggest offender is the scene where Lai, Fiery Jr., and the Force go into the forest. They try not to wake up a bunch of bugs by stepping away from them. Then the force bumps into one single tree, and it knocks down the entire forest. See, it's things like that that make it hard for me to ever take BFDI seriously, even TPOT. Part of the reason I like BFDIA so much is because I don't have to take it seriously. If the events in BFDIA 24 happened in TPOT, I probably would have hated it. But it's honestly a really funny plot for BFDIA. Also, BFDIA is a million times better at being goofy than TPOT is at being serious, but I digress. And the last one I made in the original review related to the critters. I still think the designs look way too cartoony and thus it's hard to be scared of them. Moving on. That was it for all the original points. However, I do have a couple more I'd like to add. I really enjoyed 8-Ball this episode. I honestly thought he was really funny and the episode definitely boosted my opinion of him. Not much else to say about that. One thing, however, that really bothered me this episode, and this is a massive nitpick, I know, but 2's door is locked on both ends. That's just not how doors work. Doors either lock from the inside to keep people out, or they lock from the outside to either keep people in or allow select few people to enter. You can argue that since this is a hotel room, then the lock should be on the outside. So even if the door didn't lock on both ends, it would still make sense to have the contestants need to unlock the door. Then again, this door doesn't function like a typical hotel door. Hotel doors usually have a one-way lock, where on the outside, you need a key to enter, while on the inside, you can open it with no problem. So if that were the case, 2 should be able to open the door just fine. And that's still assuming the lock operates like a regular lock on the door, which it doesn't. Actually, you know what? I have an explanation for this. The reason the door is like this is because 2 is an idiot. There, that's my explanation, and until Sam Thornberry says otherwise, I'm going to take it as canon. One last thing I will add is that this episode didn't need to be as long as it is. Don't get me wrong, I have nothing against long episodes. My favorite BFDI episode is BFDI 23, and that's the longest one in the series. And I've always been critical about TPOT being way too fast-paced. Even some episodes that can reach up to 40 minutes, I argue, could have been longer. That being said, for this episode specifically, I think 40 minutes was a bit excessive. I think you could shave a good 5 to 10 minutes off this episode and not lose much substance. This episode felt kind of fillery, which is not a bad thing in of itself, but if you're going to make a filler episode, I think you should at least make it more enjoyable. And this episode does have its moments, as I've mentioned previously, but I think there's a few things you could cut out from the episode. However, there is a chance that these things will be important at some point later, so I'd rather not list them, as I could be wrong in retrospect. In conclusion, while there are some issues I have with this episode, I come to realize TPOT 21 is pretty good, for TPOT standards. If anyone's curious, I think this is the 6th best episode in this season, behind TPOT 17 and above TPOT 7. I'll put up on screen a tier list for reference, and you can see TPOT 21 at the top of B tier. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this re-review. I hope I wasn't too hard on the episode. Then again, considering that BFDI is the most popular object show, I still feel like I might not be holding it to a high enough standard. Regardless, if you are curious about any other opinions I have on shows, whether it be BFDI, other object shows, or any show in general, let me know. I'd love to make more reviews like this. I thought this was very fun to write, so yeah. And while we're at it, watch my shows as well. I will admit, not all of my shows are wins, so I'll put a link to a playlist that consists of various episodes I'm really proud of. I think you'll like these episodes as well. That being said, I'll see you next time.